Hi there and welcome. It's Jennifer and I'm so glad you're here. Today I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm going back to the crafty basics. So I feel like I do a lot of techniques in my videos where we're really stretching our supplies and using them creatively. So I thought it'd be fun to do a video where we're really just using our supplies kind of as they're intended. And although I'm not stretching the supplies in this video, I am sharing some tips that are really good for basic stamping, embossing, and more. These are things I've learned along the way that I kind of wish I knew back in the beginning. I'm really hoping this video is valuable to any stamper. Now, what inspired me to do this video is a new collection from Simon Says Stamp called Rainbow Splash. I was really excited about this line when I first saw it because it is very approachable. This line is curated to really have some colorful basics, great for beginners, but also is great for any color-loving, experienced stampers too. So I'm going to combine a little bit of both together in this video and share some of those tips that I think are just basic tips helpful to anyone. I will be making 3 simple, colorful cards, and as I'm doing so, I'll share those tips and also a closer look at this new collection. And by the way, if you have a friend that you would love to get into crafting, this is a great place to start. So the Rainbow Splash is a new product line only available at Simon Says Stamp. And these products are really well thought out to work well together, and it's very color focused. Now, when I say color focused, it's because there is a great rainbow collection of inks, cardstock, gems, and of course the reinkers for the ink pads that all coordinate very well together, forming that rainbow. And of course, there are neutrals too. This line also does include some embossing folders that are really affordable. They're like less than $4 for a folder. Some stamp sets, dies, and little inking tools. So I will be using all of these products today besides the reinkers because the ink pads come nice and juicy and ready to stamp. And I won't be using the gemstones, except I wanted to show them to you because I'm a big fan of gems on my cards. A lot of people ask, like, where's a good place to start with gems? This is a great option because there are lots of gems here in lots of different colors, and the adhesive is already on the back. Just a little tip, if you have never used gem stickers before, I find it best to take a craft knife and kind of poke the craft knife under the gemstone so it's kind of stuck to the tip of your craft knife, then place it where you want it and use your finger to press it down. That'll give you great placement every time, and it's nice to have this mix of colors all in one set. Although I'm not using them today, you'll definitely see me use them in the future. Okay, let's start with cardstock. I feel like cardstock is the core of the cards that we make. And one thing I have learned over the years that is probably the most important thing that I've learned is that a high quality cardstock makes a huge difference in the results you get with any techniques, even with basic stamping. So I really encourage you to look at cardstocks offered by stamp companies. Those are going to be your best quality. Now, these cardstocks can vary anywhere between 80 pound and 110 pound, but when you get them from a small craft company, you know you're getting good quality that has been tested out. So here are some of the cardstocks in the Rainbow Splash line. There are 18 colors. 13 are bright colors like of the rainbow, and then there are 5 neutrals. Now the neutrals include a white that's super smooth, great for blending and stamping. I used it in today's video. There's a black that is great for die cutting and for just that pop of contrast. The gravel is fantastic. It is the perfect gray. Not too warm, not too cool, not too light, not too dark. It's just a great basic gray. The caramel is the brown that's darker than a craft cardstock, but not as dark as like a chocolate cardstock. And then the buttercream. This buttercream is super unique. I like to sometimes use ivory with white because an ivory cardstock with white is just a little bit of contrast, a little bit of interest. But oftentimes the ivory is too light. Here's a comparison. This is the buttercream from the Rainbow Splash line. It's a little bit darker than most ivories or off-white cardstocks I have. And I like that because then there's a little more contrast between the buttercream and the white. So this buttercream you'll definitely be seeing me use a lot in future videos, along with that black and gravel. Then there are the 13 rainbow colors in the collection. So in all there are 18 colors, a great curated collection that really covers everything you could need. So if you're looking for a basic color cardstock line, this is a good place to start. And I'll share some of my favorites in this collection. And remember, these coordinate very well with the inks that I'll be showing you later. All of these cardstocks are 80 pound. As I mentioned, as a crafter, I like to go between 80 pound and 110 pound with a high GSM. That's a little more information than you need, but if you are getting your cardstock from a stamp company, you know it's going to be thick, good quality, and it'll stamp well. And this is just a nice curated rainbow of colors. And by the way, these are all available in individual packs, and then there is a rainbow pack that has one sheet of all 13 of the rainbow colors, which is really a great place to start if you already have a lot of colors of cardstock and you want to see what these are like. Now here is a tip that I've started to do lately when I get new colors of cardstock. I wish I would have started this a long time ago. So when I get a new pack of cardstock, I like to take one sheet and cut it into fourths. So I have these smaller pieces that are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. So I'm cutting in half one way and in half the other way. I then tuck these smaller pieces in with the full colored sheets. The reason I like to do this as soon as I get that cardstock is I'll have some smaller pieces that are ready to go. I was finding that as I created, whenever I needed a particular color of cardstock, I would grab a full sheet, I would start using it and have a bunch of the sheet, a lot of the sheet left over, and then it would just go in my scraps drawer. By having some smaller sheets available, if I only need those smaller pieces for a project, I can grab that, and I have less going into my scrap drawer. Now that may be something that would work for you, may not, but it is a tip that I wanted to share, to just cut up some of your new cardstock into smaller workable pieces. Now let's quickly go through the different colors that we have in the rainbow here. We have Ballet, then Princess, which is gorgeous. We have Scarlet, great for Christmas. Crimson, Pumpkin, Dandelion, then a slightly lighter Canary, then Lime, Grass, which is the perfect green, Emerald, then Sea, Lake, and Heather. And the ones that I find are a nice addition to my collection are the Heather, Sea, Lake, Grass, and Princess. Those are the ones that I'm really drawn to. Okay, let's next talk about stamping and ink. And I'm going to share some things that I've learned over the years that are helpful in getting a really good stamped image. First and foremost, the tool that you use for stamping is very important. Now this is the Misty stamping tool. You see me use it in almost every video that I do. It is by far the tool that I recommend the most to a new stamper. Yes, it is an investment. However, in the long run, it'll save you a lot of time, energy, paper, frustration. It's just a very helpful tool for any stamper. And there are other stamping platforms like this out there, but this is the tried and true one, the original, and the one that I've used for many, many years. By the way, you can always save money on the Misty by watching sales around holidays. Now, if you don't have a Misty stamping tool, or if you just prefer, you can use an acrylic block. Definitely more affordable, a great place to start, but I do think looking into a stamping platform like the Misty is very valuable. Okay, now when you want to use a clear stamp, you just carefully take it off of the packaging, and then you can place it into your Misty or on a block. I'll just show you with a block first. Now this is one of the tips I wish I would have realized a long, long time ago. You want to prep your stamp before you use it. Notice when you take it out of the packaging and have never used it, it's nice and clear. You want to prep the stamp by rubbing your finger firmly against it. And notice where I did that on the left-hand side there, it turns cloudy. That means your stamp is prepped and ready to go. You can use your finger to do that or a dry cloth. Now, some people talk about sandpaper. I don't recommend that. I would stick to your finger or dry cloth. Once the stamp has that cloudy look to it, you can start stamping. Now, stamping, you just want to take the ink pad and dab it onto the stamp lightly and stamp it onto your paper. I highly recommend prepping your stamp before stamping on your project, even testing it on scrap paper. Makes a big difference. To clean my stamps, I just wipe it with a dry cloth. You could use stamp cleaner, but I found with today's inks, I didn't need to. Now I'm going to stamp out my ink swatches for these inks. I've actually done these before in the past because I tested these inks out off screen for a bit, but here I'll just do them again so you can see how I do my ink swatches. I have free ink swatches for all of the inky lines out there from different craft companies, and those are all over my blog. I'll put a link down below. And I do have ink swatches for these new Rainbow Splash inks. So I thought I'd show you just stamping these samples in my Misty stamping tool. I find creating ink swatches very valuable, worth the time, so I can find good matches or the right colors that I want when I'm creating. It's a big time saver for me in the end. Not for everyone, but it's something worth trying. Now, these are the Rainbow Splash inks. These are dye inks with a firm foam pad. If you have used Simon Says Stamp positively saturated inks before, I find them very similar and a nice addition because the Simon Says Stamp positively saturated line has a lot of like jelly bean colors, like really unique corals and pinks and such, whereas these I feel are more primary basic rainbow colors. So it's a nice addition to the positively saturated ink line. Now these are saturated dye inks that give smooth stamped results and are really good for ink blending. I'm not doing ink blending in this video, but these inks are wonderful for ink blending. I tried it and was really impressed. These will soften a little bit and dry very smooth as they are given a little time to dry. And they dry very quickly. They are water reactive. That means you can paint with them if you want to, and they are fade resistant. So here's a closer look at the colors of ink. And by the way, I did just one stamped image to get these nice, bright, vivid, solid images. And delightfully, the cardstock matches the inks very well. I get frustrated when it isn't a perfect match, between the ink and the cardstock, but these definitely are a great match. And I also find that the ink color matches the lid very nicely, which sometimes doesn't happen too. And these inks do already have a sticker on the side that has the color and the name. So you can see how well that grass matches, and you have the label on the side. You will be seeing me use these inks in future videos for basic stamping, but definitely for ink blending too. So looking at these, I really love that princess color. I like those 3 yellows together, especially that buttercream, which is soft. And remember, it's a great neutral to use on a card. Then you have the 3 greens, the light, medium, and dark, that are great for your foliage. And then those 2 blues, so unique. You got the sea and the lake. Those are amazing and fill in a hole in my Crafty ink. That heather is a beautiful periwinkle color, and then the wonderful neutrals there at the bottom. By the way, the black ink is the only one that is a felt ink pad, a firm ink pad, and it's great for stamping sentiments, which you'll see later on. Now, if you are a longtime stamper and have a lot of ink pads, you probably have some colors similar to these, so you might want to just pick and choose based on what you already have in your collection. It's always good to use different inks from different lines on the same card. Before we get started with some embossing folder techniques and more, I did want to just briefly show you these inking tools that are in this collection. These are different than anything I've used in a video. I know there are people who like to use pouncing tools like this. It is a foam round tip. You don't want to swirl back and forth with it. It's not good for blending in that way. It's better for pouncing. And when you pounce with it, you can get this fun texture that adds interest to a background or to a die cut. They're really fun over stencils. A lot of people like tools like this. I'm honestly still trying to figure out how I can best use them. And once I do, I will share that in a video in the future. Next, let's talk about embossing folders. I'll show you the folders here, talk about them in general with some tips, and then show you a really simple card technique using them. In the Rainbow Splash collection, there are 5 really great basic design embossing folders. These are 2D embossing folders, which are traditional embossing folders that will give you raised dimension. There are so many techniques you can use them with, and they're also just great for adding some texture to a simple background. As you know, there are 3D embossing folders available these days, but there's something really nice and simple about a traditional embossing folder like this. And these are very affordable. They're under $4 each and can be used in so many ways. Now, embossing folders are used with a die cut machine. We'll do die cutting later, but I also recommend die cut machines as a investment to make early on in crafting. Die cut machines can be used so many ways in card making. And again, hit those sales and look for deals to get one. Now, there are many die cut machines on the market that are great. If you're looking for a great basic manual machine, the one that I recommend right now is the Spellbinders Platinum. It has everything you need to do die cutting, embossing folders, and much more. I will be using this machine to use the basic 2D embossing folders from the Rainbow Splash line. Whatever machine you have, just follow the instructions for using a regular embossing folder, and these will work great. Now, one big tip I have that I wish I had known a long time ago is to lightly mist your cardstock, either one or both sides, with some water before putting it into the embossing folder. Then you can run that through your die cut machine, following the instructions that your die cut machine provides for using a regular embossing folder, and run it through your machine, and it'll give you this great embossed texture. It's called dry embossing, done with an embossing folder. Now, another recommendation when you get a new embossing folder, every die cut machine is a little different. Every embossing folder is a little different. So try it out. You may need to add a little cardstock shim to get a deeper impression. You just would add a piece of cardstock that just acts as a shim behind the embossing folder in your sandwich of plates. That may give you better results. You just want to test it out and get to know your machine. Once you figure out a sandwich for a particular embossing folder, whatever plates you need or shims, you can write it on your embossing folder with a permanent pen, or print a little label and stick it on there, or put it on the packaging so that once you figure it out, you don't have to try to figure out again in the future. Now here's a closer look at the embossing folders and the results they give. This one would be fun to add tiny little stamped images into the pattern or tiny little die cuts. You could use this small butterfly or dot from the Rainbow Splash stamp set and create a pattern along with that texture. Now, of the embossing folders, my three favorite are the Cascading hearts that I showed you a moment ago. And then we have this one that has a beautiful floral pattern. Such a unique design, and look at that detail. You could just create this background, add it to a card, and add a die cut sentiment on top, and you'd be good to go. And my third favorite, and the one that I'll use for today's card, is the tiny Florals embossing folder. Such an adorable one. You could do this on white cardstock and add a little gem to the center of the flowers and have a quick card. So let's make our first card, which shows a fun embossing folder technique. And I will be sharing lots of tips, basic tips that I really find helpful and often forget to share in videos. Now I'm starting out with those smaller pieces of cardstock that I cut earlier. This is a good example. I reached for these smaller pieces instead of full sheets because I only need a thin strip for this card. If I would have grabbed a full sheet, I would have had this big piece left over that I would have stuffed in my scraps drawer. Or I could have gone through and done this technique just digging through my scraps and making my own strips, but I wanted to demonstrate with today's color palette. This technique is a great one for using up your scraps. All I'm doing is cutting 1/4 inch strips. You could cut any size you want. 1/4 inch is easy to do because on most Crafty paper trimmers, like this one here, those grid lines in the background are 1/4 inch. So I just move one grid line over and I can cut and have a cardstock strip that is a 1/4 inch wide. Again, this is great technique for using up your scraps. But I will be using the 13 rainbow colors from the Rainbow Splash collection today because it forms the perfect rainbow. Many times people have asked me what colors I recommend to form a rainbow. Here you have it. Here are 13 colors that work well together for a rainbow. If you want to just have 12, an even number, you could skip one of the blues or one of the pinks. Next, you'll need a piece of lightweight copy or printer paper. You can even use something you got in the mail. Nobody's going to see it. Use some of your kids' homework that you were going to throw away when they were done. It doesn't matter. But you're going to cut it into fourths. So you have a piece that is 4¼ by 5½ inches. Again, this is thin printer paper or copy paper. I have my strips here and I'm adding them at an angle onto that copy paper with liquid adhesive. Now, here is another tip for you. One thing I recommend doing is finding your adhesive love language. I wish I had found mine a long time ago. I spent a lot of money on expensive adhesives before I realized that liquid adhesive was the way to go. Liquid adhesive is strong, very strong. Liquid adhesive gives you wiggle room time, and liquid adhesive you can use less, so it's more cost effective. Now, there are many great liquid adhesives out there. You can try different types. I prefer the Gina K Connect liquid adhesive. I've done a video about it. I'll link to it up here on the top right. But here I have it in a fine tip bottle, and you can see how fast it is to add a quick line of it. It dries pretty quickly, and it will hold beautifully. Later, I will show you a tape runner. That is another type of adhesive you can use, but I have found that I have saved a lot of money by using liquid adhesive and saved a lot of frustration because you've got that wiggle room time. However, I will show you the benefits of tape runner later on. So after I've glued down all 13 of the rainbow colors from the Rainbow Splash collection, I am very happy because instead of digging around and trying to make my own rainbow from a bunch of different companies and make it work, it's done for me. These 13 colors create a beautiful rainbow. You can remove the pastels or remove the brighter if you want to, but it's a great basic rainbow and it makes me so happy. So basically that copy paper was just to hold these strips together. You could have used a thicker cardstock, but there's really no reason to. And also the embossing folder will work better if there's not too much thickness going on. So the thin copy paper was best. Now it's time to use our embossing folder with our die cut machine. The nice thing about the Platinum here is that the instructions for using an embossing folder is right there on the plates, but you can always check the manual too. So I will put my cardstock strips, that piece that we created, into the embossing folder and run it through. I will first mist the front of it with a couple mists of water just to help get a better impression. However, you really can skip this with 2D folders. Also, if you have an inky panel that you don't want to mist and mess up, you can always mist the back side and that will help a bit too. Now we'll run that through our die cut machine. I'm a little awkward here because I've got a bad shoulder, so I'm trying to use my lower arm only to crank through, but it should go through easily. You may want to experiment with using shims, but never force it. It should go through easily. Now look at that fun texture we added to this piece. I just think that really steps up the simple card design and is such an easy tool. Those embossing folders are very affordable, again, under $4, and I love this pattern. You could add little gemstones to the center of those flowers if you wanted to, but I'm going for quick and easy. And remember, this is a great design for using up scraps. Okay, now we need a card base, and I have a tip for you that I think is a huge time saver. It's very simple, but whenever I show it, people have kind of an aha moment. I do recommend getting a scoreboard and a bone folder. If you're going to be making a lot of card bases, this is definitely something that you would want to have. In fact, I've done a video with techniques that you can do with a scoreboard, and I'll link to that up in the top right. But right now we're doing card bases. I have an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock, and I'm scoring right down the middle at 5.5 inches. This happens to be the Rainbow Splash White, which is 80 pound. I'm folding it in half, and then I will just reinforce that fold line. So now I just have a folded piece of cardstock. Now I'll cut this in half the other direction. So I'll cut it in half at 4.25 inches. This results in two top folding cards that are 4.25 by 5.5. I recommend scoring first, then cutting. It is much faster than cutting first and then scoring two panels. And then you have two cards ready to go, so you can start building up your stash of card bases. So that is a big time saver. Now you can also do it the other way. You can score down the middle at 4¼ inches, so score the long way, fold that in half, and then cut in half the other direction at 5½ inches. And this gives you a side folding note card. Some people prefer this. I usually prefer top folding, but it is good to have the options, right? So again, the tip is to score first, then cut, and it quickly gives you 2 folded cards. It is much faster, believe it or not, than cutting and then scoring the 2 pieces. If you ever learn anything from me, may it be that. It's one of the things that I've discovered is a big time saver for me. Now these again are A2 card bases, 4¼ by 5½ inches. You definitely can do other size cards. This is just what you'll see most often. Now I'll use liquid adhesive and put it on the back of our rainbow piece and add that towards the top kind of center of our card base. We have it already cut down to the right width, so it's added very quickly. By the way, with liquid adhesive, I do recommend pressing it down so all of the connection is made, especially with all that texture, and putting something heavy on it while it dries. It can be a paperweight, a book, anything, but that is also very helpful. Okay, so now we'll just trim off the excess and we can add a stamped sentiment. I thought it'd be good to use one of the new Rainbow Splash sentiment sets because there are great bold basic sentiments in here. If you are trying to get somebody new into crafting, these are great crafty gifts. Now they are also affordable because they're a smaller stamp size. We have the Happy Blooms stamp set on the left. I'll be using that Thinking of You sentiment. In the middle are the bold messages. I'll be using a Hey Friend later in this video. And on the left, we have Everyday Greetings. These are great for the inside of cards. You can build up different greetings. And of course, you can use them on the front of your card too. Since the majority of card makers make birthday cards the most, they have the Birthday Wishes stamp set and there are coordinating dies available for it. But later I will be using this Schoolhouse stamp set. I just really like the pencil, ruler, and crayon. I don't think it has to be for school. In fact, my cards are non-school cards. This is the bigger 4x6 stamp set, and it has coordinating dies available. So you'll see me use this one later. But for now, I'm using the Happy Blooms stamp set that has the Thinking of You. I'm placing my card into my Misty stamping tool right into the corner. I use the magnet to hold it in place. Then I am placing my sentiment where I want it to stamp. Then I'll close the door on the stamping tool, which will grab the stamp. Now I have already rubbed the surface of this with my finger off screen, so it is prepped and ready to go. I will use the Rainbow Splash black ink. Now remember, this is a firm felt pad, which I have found from my experience gives crisper results with sentiments. So I'm glad that they made this ink pad a felt pad. And you can see that I get nice, crisp, solid black stamped sentiment. Now you could use one of the other greetings to stamp a message on the inside, but I decided to skip that. I will link here to a video that talks about what I like to do inside of cards up at the top right. Now I did pick a matching envelope. Simon Says Stamp has a lot of great colored envelopes that match these colors nicely, and it's a great way to finish off your card. When you spend all this time invested in your card, it's nice to place it into a pretty envelope. Okay, so let's move on to some card examples that are also simple, but using stamping and doing some die cutting, and I have tricks for dimension and more. And I'm making 2 cards at once, so I have some time-saving tips. So I have chosen 4 colors from the collection. We have Lake, Sea, Grass, and Key Lime. These are beautiful greens and blues. And I'm taking the pencil and the crayon image. One of my cards will have crayons, one will have pencils. I might as well stamp them at once to save time so I can quickly make 2 cards. I have my panels that I cut down earlier. Remember, a huge time saver. They're already cut, ready to go. And I'm going to stamp my pencils and crayons on here with the matching ink color. This will give me a tone-on-tone result. If you want it to be more bold, you could definitely use black ink. And I'll share another option later on. But here I'm stamping with lime ink on lime cardstock. After I've stamped on the top of this piece, I'm going to rotate my piece and stamp it again on the other end. This is a big time saver. I'll be able to stamp more very quickly. I didn't have to cut up my cardstock into smaller pieces. Just by simply rotating it, I can stamp more. Then you'll see me shift my cardstock up and stamp some more on the inside or in the middle area there. So by stamping multiple images at once, you'll save a lot of time. Now you will notice that I am stamping each of these images 3 times. You don't have to. You can stamp it once for a lighter image, twice for a medium image, and 3 times for a darker image. You'll notice each time it gets darker. However, it won't bleed. That's one of the things I like about these inks and several others you see me use in videos, is you can stamp it multiple times with no bleeding and it'll just get darker. So say you are doing a project where you want a light, medium, and dark ink color. Instead of getting 3 ink colors or 3 ink pads, you can just use the one and stamp it once, twice, 3 times, even more to make it darker. So here I'll do the same thing with the grass ink on the grass cardstock. You saw me wipe off those stamps with the dry cloth. That's usually how I clean my stamps. If you find a stamp has stubborn ink on it, you can use a stamp cleaner. I'll link to the one that I use below. But generally, I just use a dry cloth that I can throw in my wash and use again and again. To save time, I'm not going to show all of the stamping, but I did the same thing on all 4 panels that you saw me do on the lime panel. Once all of my stamping is done, you could definitely easily fussy cut these out because they're really basic shapes, but I'm choosing to use the coordinating die set because for me it's a time saver. You can also do fun techniques with it. Now, when I get a coordinating die set, I use little snippers like the ones you see here to cut those dies apart. I do recommend, if you are a die cutter, to get good snips. It's important to cut them apart nicely so that you don't have sharp edges. Now, for lining up the dies, I found that these dies lined up really well. The inside edge lined up right with the edge of the stamping, so I could line it up easily by looking through. And then I will use temporary tape to tape it in place. Now, the temporary tape that I prefer and I use in videos all the time is Easy C tape. I have tried a million different temporary tapes for holding dies in place for die cutting, and this is the one that I like the most because it has never torn my paper, and you can reuse the pieces a few times. So if you are looking for great temporary tape for die cutting and for other purposes, Easy C is a great option. I'll link it below. It comes in a few colors. Now, when you go to die cut, you will want to make sure that you're cutting into your cutting plate and that you rotate your plates every once in a while. Don't always cut into the same side or same spot on your cutting plate. You'll start to get warping. Another thing I highly recommend when die cutting to avoid warping, and this is an important tip, is to never put your straight edge dies straight through. You want to put it at a little bit of an angle, as you see me doing here. That will prevent that popping sound that you often hear with die cutting, and it will prevent warping. It is a big, important thing to do to prevent warping. So again, to prevent warping, flip your cutting plate often, flip it, rotate it, cut into different areas, not always there at the center. And make sure if you have a straight edge on your die to not run it through straight. Make sure you have your dies at a bit of an angle. These tips will definitely allow your cutting plates to last longer, but do know they are considered replaceable items. Disposable items, I guess you'd say. Disposable doesn't sound right because you can use them for a very long time. And I do have a video showing how to remove warping from your die cut plates and how to clean them up. It works wonderfully and it also extends the life of your plates. I will link to that video up here on the top right and in my description below. That tip works with a variety of different die cut machine plates, so it's definitely worth checking out. But notice, I always go in at an angle and I always have my die in a different spot on the plate. I'm not always cutting right at the center of the cutting plate. And I do rotate my plates often. I did continue to die cut out all of the crayons and pencils that I stamped. I will have more than I need, but I have a drawer and a little book that I have that I keep all my extras in. I just find that having extras is very helpful because I can quickly throw cards together whenever I need to, and it's also fun to reach for when you aren't feeling very creative. And I'll link to a video about that up here on the top right. Okay, so now I thought I'd stamp thank you on all of my crayons and all of my pencils. And for the crayons, I am placing them into my MISTI stamping tool. I'm lining up the thank you sentiment on the side, closing the door on the stamping tool to grab it, and then I'm stamping once again with the matching color of ink. So I'm stamping lime ink on the lime cardstock. Again, stamping 3 times just to make it darker, but you definitely could stamp it 1 time for that great tone-on-tone look. Remember that these colors will soften a little bit as it dries. Now on one of my crayons on this card, I will stamp with the black ink so that I have one that stands out and it'll be the focal point on my card. When I stamp a sentiment, I always stamp with a good black ink and I stamp it once lightly, again lightly, and then again lightly, so that it builds up that image without like squishing the ink and gives you a really great, crisp, solid result. Now I will use my liquid adhesive to glue these onto my card base. I have an A2 card base. It's the leftover one I had from before. And I'm just gluing these up against each other randomly on the background. I'm not taking any care to get them all lined up. I just want a kind of a playful look. You'll notice that I'm gluing these all directly onto my card, not adding any dimension. You definitely could if you wanted to, and I'll give you my tip for that on my next card. Now this one here I've placed down, it's the focal point one because it has the black sentiment. After I glued it down and put the next one down, I thought, you know what, it'd be fun to pop up just that one with the black sentiment. So because this is liquid glue, it's not dry just yet. And I've got that wiggle room time, so I can carefully peel it up. It may tear a little bit, but not enough to really damage that die cut. So now I can go ahead and add some dimension behind it and then glue it back in place. And by wiggle room, I mean that you can place your die cut down and shift it left or right also till you're happy with where it is. Now to put dimension behind this crayon, I die cut 3 additional die cuts from green cardstock. You could use scrap cardstock, which you see me use later, but I had this here, so I thought I'd use it. And I glued those 3 die cuts together and behind our stamped one. Then I'll put it back onto the card. Now that has some nice dimension. You definitely could use foam tape here. A lot of crafters like foam tape. I prefer not to use it for many reasons. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But a great way to add that extra dimension is to stack up a few die cuts. So here's a completed card. I grabbed a matching envelope. Doesn't that make it all kind of pop even more and look even more special? I highly recommend a good quality colored envelope. And here you can see how it's a very simple card design, but we added a little interest with that black sentiment that's popped up. So you definitely have a focal point on your card. So for this one, I showed you how I use the matching ink and cardstock for a tone-on-tone look. Here's another tip for you and a time saver. For my pencil card, I wanted to have thank you on the side of each pencil also. But instead of using the matching ink color, and just for a little variation, I'm using the gravel color to stamp on all of these colors. The gravel color will be nice on whatever color you stamp on. It'll give you a darker look, but not like black. So if you're looking for stamping on a colored cardstock with something that'll stand out, but not as much as black, not the focal point, I recommend the gravel. You'll see it dries nicely on all the different colors, and it's definitely a great neutral ink pad to have. If you watch my videos, you know I like a good gray ink. I use Simon Says Stamp Fog ink often, which is super light. I use Hero Arts Granite ink, which is light. And then this gravel color is a great medium. The 3 would work really well together and are great to have in your ink arsenal because you can use them so well with colors of cardstock. Okay, so now it's time to add these pencils to the card, and I wanted to add them with dimension. And here I thought I would show you the many reasons I don't use foam tape or foam squares that often. I do sometimes, but why I choose to use scraps for my dimension instead. And I really encourage you to try this because you'll be impressed how well it works. First of all, I use my scraps, something that would probably have ended up in the trash can, and I cut thin strips from it. Some strips are wide, some are thin. Sometimes if I stamp something and die cut it out, I have just enough to cut 1 strip off the side. That's fine. I cut it off before it goes in the trash. And I have a drawer full of these thin scrap strips in white, and then I also have colors. Whenever I want to add dimension behind something, I reach for my scraps. So if I have sentiment strips or something narrow like this, I go for those strips and I start gluing them to the back. No one will ever know that they have mess up stamping on them. No one will ever know it's trash. Some people even use like cereal box chipboard for this, all about recycling. And it doesn't cost anything because it probably would have ended up in the trash anyways. The other reason I use scraps for dimension is because it is strong. It won't get crushed in the mail. When you use foam tape or foam squares, anywhere that there's a gap in the tape or squares, you will likely get squished in the mail when it goes through the machines, and it will cause creases. I've gotten many cards in the mail that do that. I've actually done a video where I mailed myself cards to test it to show you. I did the video years ago. I really encourage you to watch it. I'll link it up here and in the description below. But it shows why I like to use either solid craft foam or scraps for my dimension. Another reason is I found that some foam tapes that I used years ago would kind of fall apart and not hold up well as it aged. It just, the foam tape didn't age well. Now, if you've got a good quality product, that probably won't happen. If you have foam tape from a craft company, that probably won't happen. But I just find it to be cost effective and to give better, strong dimensional results to use scraps. So you will see me use scraps for building up dimension a lot in my videos, whether I cut scraps or die cut scraps and build them up. I just wanted to really explain why I do that. You can definitely, if you prefer, instead use foam tape. It's much faster, totally up to you. And I still use foam tape and foam squares for certain things. Now, to glue these dimensional pencils down, I thought I would demonstrate with tape runner this time. As I mentioned earlier, I have pretty much switched to using liquid glue exclusively. But a good tape runner like this one that puts down tiny little dots is also a great option, because you can rub it away if you change your mind. And you do have the opportunity to move with a tape runner like this. This is the Simon Says Stamp one. It works great. It has refills, and there are other great brands out there. Now, I use tape runner pretty much exclusively for many, many years. If you watch my old videos, that's what you'll see. But I have definitely learned over the years, in the last few years, that liquid adhesive is really more cost effective, I feel, and has the other advantages that I mentioned earlier. But it is a personal choice. There are advantages to using a tape runner like this, and it just depends on how you like to craft. So here I'm gluing them all down with the tape runner. It works great, but this last one, I'm going to use my liquid adhesive, and watch. You can see the wiggle room time I talk about. You can see how I keep moving this, sliding it around until I'm happy with where it's placed. Oh, and another thing about liquid adhesive, I trust it. I trust that it'll dry nice and strong. I have trust issue with adhesive, and so a good liquid adhesive is always a great, trustworthy option. So here we have our completed card. I did match it up with a colorful envelope, and you can see that dimension. Whenever you're creating a simple card design, that dimension can really make it stand out and add a lot of interest. That little bit of shadow behind it is really fun. You could use foam tape behind these, but I used those scraps just so I could save money, get strong dimension, and it'll go through the mail nicely. If you're interested about how to mail cards, I will share a video up here on the top right and in my description below that may be helpful. So there you have it, a longer crafty episodes that's kind of back to the basics, some of those basic tips that I found helpful along the way that I wish I would have known early on. If you know of a new crafter, you could share this video. Maybe they'll get bit by that card making bug. If you're interested in the supplies I use, they are linked below in my YouTube description. I do have links to the videos I mentioned also, and I will link to a couple of them here in the middle if you're looking for more inspiration. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon with a regular crafty technique video. Have a great day.